A group at the Vatican dedicated to studying the Bible is reconsidering whether the Christian understanding of Pharisees as hypocrites is accurate. The Pontifical Biblical Institute is sponsoring an international conference on this topic. Religious experts from all over the world are discussing the history of Jesus and the Pharisees. This study comes as the Institute celebrates its 110th anniversary. Rabbi David Rosen of the American Jewish Committee and a veteran of Catholic-Jewish dialogue, especially with popes, joins us from Rome. Rabbi, you delivered opening remarks at this conference. What was your message? What should Catholics know about the ancient figure of the Pharisee?
Well, my opening remarks were that we need to both use scholarly research and contemporary understanding in order to advance not only our grasp of the historical context in which Jesus lived, but in also to avoid misunderstandings and misbehavior towards one another in contemporary society. And the irony is that because Christianity at a certain point, or should I say the Jesus movement, detached itself from its Jewish roots, so it no longer started to look at the New Testament texts as internal debates within the Jewish community, but sought to portray those, if you like, as opposed to Jesus outside the community or outside their community. And the word Pharisee, instead of referring to a particular community where there were Sadducees and Essenes and different Herodians and different groups referred to, in which there were, if you like, good guys and not so good guys, became identified as another word for bad guys. Now, because a Jewish tradition saw itself as coming out of the Pharisaic tradition, therefore, the term Jews and Pharisaic became interchanged, and therefore, when the word is used pejoratively in a negative sense to mean rigid, legal, nasty people, that is actually being directed to the Jewish community and therefore is a source of anti-Jewish prejudice.
What grade would you give the Catholic Church in recent years when it comes to Catholic-Jewish dialogue?
So we live in a golden age of Catholic-Jewish dialogue. The revolution, we must give copyright to John the 23rd, who of course ushered in the Second Vatican Ecumenical Council. And in 1965, the document Nostra Aetate was promulgated, which revolutionized the whole approach of the Church towards Jews, Judaism, and also to Israel eventually. So that stated, Nostra Aetate, amongst other things in section 4, affirms that God does not repent of his gifts, that the covenant with God and the Jewish people is eternal. It condemns anti-Semitism and repudiates the idea that the Jewish people has been rejected by God and replaced by the Church. Coming out of that emerges an approach in which we are seen as partners. In fact, Pope Francis today talks of the complementarity of our relationship. So it's really a golden era. Each pope has moved one stage further in deepening the bonds between the Church and the Jewish people. But this doesn't mean that there aren't residual prejudices. You can't have 2,000 years, if you like, of mutual alienation just disappear in 50. It takes a lot of work and a lot of education.
Sure.
And even people who do love the Jewish people profoundly, like Pope Francis himself, may even unconsciously use a generalization like talking about the Jews or the Pharisees in a generalized way. What we would like him to do is to say those Pharisees or those Jews. Of course, nobody thinks that the Pope himself has any prejudicial negative attitudes. The problem is not so much the Pope. The problem is some priest in Bogota, for example, who would say, well, the Pope talks like that about the Jews and the Pharisees, why shouldn't I?
Thank you so much for joining us for your insights onto Catholic-Jewish relations. Rabbi David Rosen of the American Jewish Committee.
Thank you, Lauren.